What about the Armenian Genocide? The what, you may be saying? Hitler got inspired from the Armenian crisis. Just what did he learn? Find out next on The Crossover.
We'll be right back.
For nearly 2,000 years, Jews and Christians have been divided. But now, God is calling for the healing of past hurts and the comforting of His people. Discover how God is prophetically uniting Jews and Christians across the world today on The Crossover. And now, here is your host, Mitch Jerome.
To help us understand the Armenian Genocide is Reverend Steve Missick. Reverend Missick has lived in the Middle East, visited Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, Kuwait, and other lands. He's also served in the Iraq War stationed in Baghdad. He's a soldier. He's assistant ordained minister of the gospel. And welcome, Steve, to our show.
It's good to be here today.
Good to have you back, Steve. You're going to deal with a topic today, Steve, that I don't know what small percent of the population is even aware. So why don't you define for us what is an Armenian and where do they live?
Okay, the Armenian homeland is going to be around Mount Ararat. It's north of Turkey, of eastern Turkey. It's the Caucasus. It borders. If you're in Armenia today, the horizon is dominated by Mount Ararat, and they're aware of Noah and Shem, Ham, and Japheth. This is where, I guess from their point of view, where human civilization began after the flood of Noah. But the Armenian people they're related to Europeans. They speak a European type language and from the European language family. So they're not Semitic or they're not related to Arabs or other groups. But they are a Christian people.
So take us there, because this Armenian genocide that you're about to embark on.
Well, what happened was this was from the year 1915 to 1925. There were incidents of violence against Armenians before then, some massacres in the 1890s, I believe. But this large, full-scale genocide, this ethnic cleansing, took place the beginning of the second year of World War I. And what happened, as I mentioned, I was talking to you earlier today, was Turkey had large non-Muslim, non-Turkish minority groups. And they saw these people as a threat. Perhaps they thought they were going to, this is World War I, and at that time Russia was an enemy. And they were concerned that
Russia was an enemy to Turkey.
Russia was an enemy to Turkey. Turkey was allied with Germany, and there's these conflicts, and they were afraid that the local Christians of Turkey, the Ottoman Empire, could join with the Russians and fight against them. So then and that was an excuse. This is also a religious thing too. We had an Islamic country with a Christian minority, and you had this desire just to wipe out the infidel. So they took this as an excuse to start wiping out the Christians. And these three groups took it really hard. Mostly the Armenians. We're looking at perhaps 1.3, 1.5 million Armenians were killed, but there was also
over how many years was that? You're saying 10 years?
10 years. But most of these murders took place during World War I. I have here some eyewitness testimony of what happened to the Assyrian Christians.
Yeah, share with us.
I'll read this. This is from a contemporary account by a Protestant minister named, he's an Assyrian named Joel Werda. He wrote, Little children were stabbed with daggers or chopped into pieces by axes before the eyes of their frantic parents. Young virgins were assaulted while their helpless fathers were compelled to witness this hellish crime. Many of the refugees have fled back and sought shelter of the church edifices, thinking perhaps Islam passion might balk at the sight of the sacred shrine which its adherents were accustomed to revere. But the malignant flood of crimes knew no bounds. The Christians' holy Bibles were opened on the pulpits, and their pages were desecrated by the committal of unmentionable deeds. The murderers entered with every conceivable weapon, from long sword to wooden mallets. They first commenced with little children and infants. The latter were held by their tiny feet, and their heads were dashed against the walls and stone pavements. The older ones were held up by the hair of their head, hanging, while their bodies were severed with one stroke of the sword. The little girls were publicly assaulted, then cut in two. Others were taken to roofs of buildings where they were dashed to their death in the streets below. Others had their hands and their limbs amputated by sickles and axes, and they had their skulls crushed by wooden mallets. The spacious courtyard became impassable from the bleeding fragments of the victims' mutilated bodies, while blood literally leaked from the floor of each building to the one below. Of the entire number of Christians, this is one place where these massacres happened. These were Aramaic Christians being killed. Estimated more than 6,000 in the French mission buildings alone. Not more than 60 souls remained who escaped in a miraculous way. All the rest were put to death in less than 48 hours. The official time for the application of the mandate of jihad. So this is really heinous. And these weren't just taking people out and shooting them. These were slow tortures and very bizarre, twisted, sick ways these people were put to death.
So where are the righteous nations? What's being stated? Where is help? Where is what's being told around the world?
Well, this is often called the forgotten or untold Holocaust or genocide. There is a video put out by Assyrian Christians in Australia called the Untold Holocaust, and there's a silence.
Well, somebody who did understand it and grasp from it was, in an infamous way, would have been Adolf Hitler. Why don't you share with us? Somehow he was able to focus on this event, and how did he take it?
More of The Crossover when we return. For too long, misinformation, misunderstanding, and miscommunication have separated Jews and Christians. The Crossover presents Jewish-Christian Relations.
Hitler was a student of Luther's later works there, and he had applied it to, I think he even went into one of, I'm not sure it was Poland, but one of the countries, and on the day of Luther's birthday, as a reward or a recognition of Luther to attack that country in that day. That's what a little bit of readings have shown. But are there any more modern areas where seepage has come forth from this type of past that we should be aware of?
Yes, there are. You know there is such a thing as neo-Nazi movements in Europe, and I'm afraid in America too. They, perhaps in remote places like Idaho, and some of them have been disbanded and transcended. But these movements, hate groups of various kinds, love to quote from Martin Luther. And that's one reason we in the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America were convinced that we had to renounce them, so no one would confuse those writings from almost 500 years ago with the views that we have today, which are very appreciative and positive towards Jews and Judaism.
Share with us, Dr. Luther, I'm sorry, Dr. Scher, the works that you have, the guidelines that you have come forth here for the Lutheran and Jewish relations, and it's a 15-point guideline that you have, but this came forth in what year now?
Well, there are three things that we've done, sort of in 4-year periods. In 1994, we issued what's called the Declaration of the Evangelical Lutheran Church to the Jewish community. And it's in that document that we renounced these views and these writings of Luther and said we would like to live henceforth, quote, with love and respect for the Jewish people. And then in 1998, as a follow-up, we adopted a set of guidelines to guide our clergy and congregations in opening up local relationships, dialogues, discussions. Take the Lutheran confirmation class to visit the synagogue. Have the bar mitzvah students learn about Christianity. And it's very practical matters like that. And more recently, we have issued these talking points, which is a set of discussion materials. These came out only about 1 year ago. Discussion materials on topics in Christian-Jewish relations, which we hope will be used in many, many of our congregations across the country.
And how, so in 98, when recommendations had come forth for the Lutherans to take the initiative to reach out to the...
Welcome back to The Crossover.
Adolf Hitler, was it the 22nd of August, 1929? Hitler said, "I've given my orders to my death units to exterminate without mercy or pity women, children, men, women, and children belonging to the Polish-speaking race. It is only in this manner that we can acquire the vital territory which we need. After all, who remembers today the extermination of the Armenians?" So like
accurate.
you mentioned, Adolf Hitler is paying attention to this genocide, and it was his inspiration to carry out the Holocaust of the Jewish people. And the Turks got away with it, so I guess he thought he could get away with genocide of the Jewish people. So perhaps if the world took a stand against the Armenian genocide and they held the people responsible who committed these crimes, perhaps it wouldn't have happened in the Jewish Holocaust in Europe with 6 million Jews being killed.
Interesting thought. If the world rose up, there may not have been the word Holocaust as we know it today. I hear where you're coming from. So has there been any retribution to this group that has slaughtered, these Turks that have done this at all, even now? I mean, anything?
Well, today in Turkey, it's actually a crime to discuss or mention the Armenian massacres. You could be arrested for talking about it. There was an Armenian man last year. I mean, it's like this isn't something that just happened in the 1915 and 1925. You actually have Armenians being killed just last year. There's a man named Hrant Dink who was putting together a documentary about the genocide of the Armenians, and he was assassinated for it. And the interesting thing is, just a couple of days later, the assassin had a picture taken with all the police officers holding a Turkish flag, and they're all smiling around this man,
Really?
this young man who committed this murder. So it's obviously police complicity or perhaps participation in this murder. And even in the 1990s, you had Protestant churches, Armenian and Assyrian Christian churches, which were being raided by the Turkish authorities, and everyone was being carried, to jail just for practicing Christianity. Back before these killings took place, you're looking at what we call Turkey today is Asia Minor, and you had the Turkish people, but you also had these other minority groups, Greek and Assyrian and Armenian, and these people were killed by such large numbers that I don't know exactly how many. 2-3 million people, population-wise. Now Turkey only has a population of like less than 1% Christians. So you're talking about substantial, large Christian communities before these killings took place, and now Christianity has dwindled to less than 1%.
So prior to in the days of Jesus, we're saying this is where the churches were located. I think you said
Right.
7 churches.
When you read the book of Revelations, it talks about it's a vision of Jesus John has, and Jesus sends message to 7 churches of Asia: Smyrna, Laodicea, Ephesus. I mean, these are places where Paul and Barnabas and the apostles preached the gospel. This is the place where Christianity began. And now all that's left are these once the earliest Christian communities. I mean, places we read about in the Bible are now just reduced to archaeological ruins. And one of the communities that survived the longest was Smyrna, which is on the coast of the Mediterranean. In the 1920s, the Turks went in there and just basically butchered all the Christians, all the Greek Orthodox Christians that were left. And during World War I, Iraq, Syria, all of Turkey was part of the Ottoman Empire. And this is when we had Lawrence of Arabia, T.E. Lawrence, who had an Arab revolt. So what was going on was you had all these multi-ethnic people and these different nationalities in the Ottoman Empire, and the empire was breaking apart. The Arabs were breaking off, and the Turkish people were afraid that the Armenians were going to break off, and the Greeks were going to break off. So they resorted to systematically annihilating these groups through the ways, they're killing these Aramaic-speaking Christians. But they just took these people. They'd have mass hangings. They would just go into villages and just kill people. There's like blood literally flowing on the roads. And there's places, you see the photographs, where as far as the eye can see, there's just corpses laying all over the place.
All over down the road.
Right.
So these Armenians or other, let's even spread out to other minority Christian groups, Assyrians, you were saying, etc., when they flee, wherever they end up, where do they go? And what's the church like, the Christian church like in these countries? I mean, it's there today. I don't know in what way, shape, or form you live there. Share with us. What are we taking for granted in America as a Christian versus?
We will be right back after this short break. Over the centuries, Jews and Christians have been persecuted, tortured, and martyred. Never again. Never again. God has a plan to establish solidarity in these prophetic times. The Crossover presents Never Forget.
1938 was the largest Nazi meeting outside of Germany, on our soil. In fact, I have an advertisement in my book, the advertisement for that meeting.
Yes.
And on the opposite side of it, Mitch, you look up on top there, that is this is kind of unique, but in the book I have the train schedule, in the advertisement is the train schedules for the trains coming out to Camp Siegfried. The Nazis would rent entire trains from New York City. And here you have the train pulling in to Camp Siegfried.
Saluted.
It looks like Germany. You would not believe that this is America.
This is, if you didn't see the picture,
yeah,
you wouldn't believe this.
And right below it is the Nazi headquarters. That picture you're looking at now is the headquarters of the Nazis in America. The Nazis were so entrenched at Camp Siegfried that they built a little village alongside this camp for the Nazis.
German Gardens?
It's called German Gardens,
Okay.
and they named the streets. Now, some of them are like Berliner Street and that, which really isn't offensive, but they actually named the street Adolf Hitler Street, Goring Street, and Goebbels Street. And to this day, that is the official name of that street. We have a name in the United States of a street today. Now, unofficially, it's called Park Boulevard. So if you go to that location, and by the way, there's a picture of me in the book at the corner of Goring and Hitler Street. Of course, it's called Park Boulevard and Oak Street today. But if you own property and you have a deed, on the deed it'll be Adolf Hitler Street. And I went to the tax map. I have the tax map. And the tax map will say Park Boulevard, parentheses, Adolf Hitler Street, because Adolf Hitler Street is the official name.
So
that's how, Mitch, I don't want to blow this out of proportion because the Nazis were not becoming mainstream in America. I don't want anybody to think from this interview that America almost became Nazi. What I want the people to understand is they were in America.
They had a foothold.
They had a foothold in America. They had people listening to them. They were widespread. When you have meetings of 40,000 in 1938 like that, that's significant. And it's unique. It's unique in American history. This is European anti-Semitism trying to take hold of America.
Welcome back to The Crossover.
I think this is important because this isn't just something that happened in the past. Last year, in 2007, in the fall, the House of Representatives tried to pass a resolution basically saying what happened to the Armenians, the Armenian Genocide, was a bad thing, but the president's administration tried to kill that resolution before it came to be voted on, because their concern was, well, the Turks are our allies, we don't want to agitate them, because as I mentioned, in Turkey this is a very, very sensitive issue.
They don't recognize it, you said.
The Turkish people say there was no genocide. It didn't happen.
You say the Turkey people, the government.
The Turkish government.
Okay.
The Turkish government officially, that's the law. The Turkish government says there was no Armenian genocide, or there weren't any killings of Assyrians or Greeks or anything like that. But the thing is, there are records about this. There's governmental archives, and they're top secret. No one's allowed to see them because, it's known that this did happen, that these, 1 million Armenians were killed, and they don't want anyone to see the record that these things happened. There's many photographs which we've seen, eyewitness testimony. This thing is not a product of imagination. This is historical fact. But there is concern about, let's not upset the Turks. They're our allies, and so they were able to kill the bill.
So the bill was killed because we didn't want to be offensive.
Resolution.
Our government didn't want to offend the Turkish government because, are we allies with Turkey?
Well, it doesn't seem like it to me. I mean, they voted in an Islamist government just recently. When I was a soldier going to Iraq for the war, and we were supposed to go through Turkey. The troops were supposed to go through Turkey,
in, right?
and they would not let us in. We had to go around through Kuwait. So there's a lot of anti-American sentiment in Turkey.
Funny what we call
too.
an ally, huh?
I know. I agree with that.
So Steve, So America's reaction was they're going to try to pass this just bill or something just to at least recognize it.
Right. We're just going to say this is a bad thing, killing all these people, but they couldn't even get it passed, the resolution. And I think the resolution should have been passed because
what does it really say?
Well, this has a lot of ramifications in the Middle East today. Like I mentioned, you had large, vigorous Middle Eastern Christian communities that were wiped out. And see, this isn't just something that happened then. This is an ongoing process. And as I mentioned, there's been genocide. I mean, there's been assassinations of Armenian Christians going on just last year. So this isn't just something in the past.
Getting the truth is sometimes an issue.
Right.
Then you've got the people, who usually are obviously don't have the power that the government has. So what should the Christians, what's our reaction to this? If you can't fight the government and they don't make change, and you're trying to be righteous in your actions, what are we limited to, or what should we be doing?
I think that one thing that happened with this Armenian genocide resolution, I think that there's a failure that went on, was I believe that the evangelical Christian community in the United States should have gotten behind that resolution, because this is a Christian issue. This is an issue of history. This is something that had a huge effect on that region and still having an effect today. This is a current issue. Like, you go to jail, if you discuss the Armenian genocide in Turkey, you could be arrested and go to jail for it today. Yeah. So this isn't just ancient history. That's what Bush said. Well, this is old, this is history. It's not we shouldn't be talking about history when he tried to kill the bill. How are Christian minorities treated in the Islamic world? Do we really see a religion of peace towards Christians? No, we don't. They were called the Dahimis in Turkey. Dahimi is a non-Muslim, sort of a protected people. And you had to live basically as a second-class citizen. Right, well, there were restrictions on Christians, like you'd have to wear a mark showing you're a Christian. You couldn't, this is not a new thing. This principle of Dahimi and paying the jizya goes back to the earliest days of Islam.
And that's the tax that you would put
Jizya is a tax that you had to pay. It's either convert, die, or pay the jizya.
Okay.
And that's why a lot of people did convert, not because of the merits of Islam. By living as a Dahimi, by living as one of these minority groups.
Right.
As Christians, supposedly you're people of the book, so they'll allow you to exist, but you can't be, you can't share your faith with other people. There's restrictions on, how loud the services are. Like I mentioned, this idea where you can't build churches or do reconstruction. This comes from the millet system, the Dahimi system of the Muslims. So this is what the Eastern Christians had to live under. But what disturbs me is when you see killings of Christians, like Sudan, right? This has been going on in the south of Sudan, where you have Christians actually literally enslaved by the Arabs. You had the blacks, Christians, and animists in the south. And the Arabs would literally come in and take people as slaves today in the 20th and 21st century. But it wasn't reported in the mainstream media until now you got this Dhofar thing. We have Muslim on Muslim violence. They'll talk about it. In Indonesia, there's been violence against Christians. East Timor. I think this is where the Christian community should step in. And like on this program here, we have a Christian media. Pat Robertson, 700 Club, wasn't talking about it.
Yeah, okay.
And I was disappointed that other news agencies, this is a Christian issue. What's going on is these people, they're Eastern Orthodox, but they're Christians. They believe in Jesus, that He's the Lord and Savior, that He died on the cross and rose again. We have the same New Testament. These are believers in the Messiah, and they were killed because they were Christians. That's why this is going on. And I think that's relevant. And that all Christians should be concerned that, like I mentioned, it wasn't just Armenians. It was Assyrian, Aramaic, and it was the Greek Orthodox. This is a multi-ethnic killing of Christians. Right. If you're a Christian in Turkey at that time, you're in trouble. They're coming for you.
And
so
if we don't stand up for them,
Christians need to know about it. We need to pass this resolution. Like they say, those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And like I said, this is something going on right now.
So Steve, in the last 90 seconds or so that we have, what would you like to emphasize here? I mean, we have Islam getting a bigger foothold in America. Who knows what that will look like for us down the road. You've lived in the land where Islam was predominant, and we still have a lot of freedom here. but what's your view for down the road for this country?
I think that what's happened recently in the Middle East, we're looking at Iraq, where we're seeing a repeat of what happened in 1950, 1925, where the Iraqi Christians were being targeted by for destruction by Al-Qaeda and these radical Muslim groups. And you had over, maybe even as many as 300,000 refugees. I mean, Christians were being killed in Baghdad. They had to get out of there. And the American military wasn't protecting them for whatever reason. We weren't doing it. And so right now, this is something that's going on today, where you have Christians who are being killed, Christians who have to flee for their lives and becoming refugees, just stranded with nowhere else to go in Jordan and in Syria. And what do we do about it? Well, you need to be informed, because there are organizations that try to work to make a difference. And one thing that I've discovered that I thought was really good is an organization called the Barnabas Fund. And they do two things. One is they publicize these persecutions, of what's going on to Middle Eastern Christians right now. It's the best organization I've seen in doing this. And the second thing they do...
So not just Armenian, just persecuted Christians in the Middle East, period.
Okay, the Barnabas Fund does persecution of Christians everywhere in the world, but especially in the Middle East, especially in the Islamic world. But they do two things. They create awareness about it, and they also have programs where they go and get aid to those people. So you give to the Barnabas Fund, and they could get food, clothing, shelter to these destitute Christians.
Well, Steve, we will have to rejoin another time, and we look forward to it. And thank you for updating us and opening our eyes. And you're the voice for the Armenians and the other groups that really don't have a voice. Bring stuff to us that we don't hear about. And bless you in your ministry, and good to see you again.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll be back in just a minute, and thank you for watching The Crossover. Where is your voice when injustice raises her venom? Injustice appears to prevail and be on the increase, and therefore our voices en masse should be thundering. Are you doing your part as a righteous person? Here's one man whose voice was heard, Pastor Niemöller, addressing the U.S. Congress in 1968, and his words still are penetrating decades later.
When Hitler attacked the Jews, I was not a Jew. Therefore I was not concerned. And when Hitler attacked the Catholics, I was not a Catholic, and therefore I was not concerned. And when Hitler attacked the unions and the industrialists, I was not a member of the unions, and I was not concerned. But then Hitler attacked me and the Protestant Church, and there was no one left to be concerned.
Be concerned. Become an activist.
Join Mitch and Rosalie as they reach an ever-growing worldwide audience through The Crossover. We invite you to become a Crossover partner right now by calling the number on your screen. For your monthly gift of $30 or more, you will receive the Crossover Partnership Pack, which includes a DVD of today's program, a personal greeting and prayer message from Mitch and Rosalie, more information about the Crossover Project. As you continue to support The Crossover each month, you will receive a new Crossover DVD, plus a ministry report, and your name will be added to our healing room. Call now and join the growing family of Crossover partners. And be sure to join us again next week as Mitch and Rosalie tackle timely topics and welcome dynamic guests on The Crossover.